In this video, we'll talk about Matt Rife being dominant in 4 out of the 5 elements regarding his facial features, how he's built for attention, and how he very likely has difficulty slowing down. Enjoy. Welcome back, everybody. Today we've got Matt Rife. He's a stand-up comedian, has a new Netflix special called Natural Selection. I have yet to see it, but he's very funny. Came to fame on TikTok. So let's talk about his features, but if you're new to the channel, please go up here and watch my 5-minute crash course face reading video. Very important. If you've never seen a face reading, it will clear some things up for you, let you know what face reading is and isn't. If you're liking my content, please like, subscribe, hit that bell notification, and share this with someone who you think will find it interesting. What's interesting about Matt Rife is he's dominant in a lot of elements, 4 in particular, and kind of mildly deficient in 1. But even with that 1 that he's deficient in, he still has a pretty strong feature that stimulates that element. So to be dominant in 4 elements is rare. To be dominant in 5 is even more rare. But he is dominant in earth, first and foremost. That mouth, those big lips, full mouth. The mouth itself is actually sizable. It's kind of big. So that relates to generosity and compassion, empathy, being of house and home, quality food, having a good family life. Also, anything about the 5 senses, sight, scent, sound, touch, taste, all of that. So if you were a lifestyle client, I would be asking him, are those themes pretty active in your life? Do you lean into those things? Do you like posh things? And, all people do to some degree, but if you have a big dominant earth feature, that means that your life force is going to run a bit better if you're engaging those things more than the average person. So he's also got some good fire. He's got his inner canthus, both of the inner points of his eyes, very sharp. The outer edges of his mouth come to a point. When he smiles, things wrinkle up. When he smiles, he gets wrinkles in the cheeks. All of these things point to fire. So when I'm watching him and I'm seeing him do his comedy, he's got earth with that big, big earth featured mouth. Then he's got fire. He also has quite a bit of metal, which are these big, broad, open spaces with not a lot going on. So big metal, which relates to beauty and cleanliness and minimalism and having structure, organized structure in your life, being in a clutter-free environments. So really strong metal. And then he's also got a ton of wood, really strong chiseled jawline, like really strong. And his face is not rectangular. It's a bit more square, which relates to the kind of earth and metal elements, but really square jaw. So again, when you have all of these elements strong on your face, that means that you also have to engage all of these elements to keep your life force going, which can be a bit daunting for a person. So that's why when you are balanced in all the 5 elements, it's not a blessing and a curse, but there's also a pitfall like anything in life. Anything that's we think is like, oh, cool, there's a dark side to it. So he's got a lot of that going on. He's also, with all of these features coming together, and it's interesting because with that strong wood, if you were my lifestyle client, I would say, hey, given that really strong jaw, you're going to need to play to strength training and fitness a bit because everyone does. Let's not get it twisted. Everyone needs to exercise, but when we see strong wood features, that means that person is going to be more inclined to go that route. They're probably going to enjoy it a bit more than the average person. And so doing a little bit of image searching, Matt Rife is ripped. He's completely into fitness. He's really well built. He's just like, you can tell he works out hard. And I think, great. With those wood features, I would think like that's a necessity for a guy like that. So, those are some metrics that I'm seeing in terms of alignment that are great and good. Where he's lacking a little bit is the water element. So water element features, we're going to see big ears. We're going to see really big eyes. We're going to see a really big open forehead. And his forehead is pretty decently sized, but it doesn't, the hairline's a little bit low. And so that's not like conducive to like the water element per se, but he does have a really wide chin. So that's a strong water feature. That's his most dominant water feature. So that's interesting, but that would mean that the water element lifestyle rhythms, at least in theory, would be a bit more difficult for him. Slowing down, being still, practicing Tai Chi, reading philosophy, getting into the depth and the awe and the wonderment. And those things might be difficult for him. Hard to say. Again, if you were my lifestyle client, I would be talking to him and working with him around that because if we're deficient in an element and strong in all the rest, excuse me, what that means is that we have to tonify that one deficient element just to keep things in harmony. So I would be exploring that with him. He's also got the cleft chin. So when we see this mark here, that is an attention marker. That means the person either wants attention, either digests the attention of other people really well, or in a nutshell, is designed to be in the limelight. They handle that energy well, which he does. If you've seen him on stage, he's incredibly good. He's just very sharp, very confident, very funny, and handles and digests attention really well. Now, interestingly, going back to that earth element, that big mouth, people with those mouths are usually generous and they're compassionate. And interestingly, if you watch his comedy, when he roasts people, which he absolutely does in the crowd, there's always a soft, pleasant edge to it. He's never mean or harsh about it. And if he is, he crosses the line, he immediately backpedals and makes the people feel comfortable. You can tell that he doesn't want to hurt people's feelings. It really comes across in his comedy, but he'll also totally take shots at people, which is hysterical when he does. So he's got a lot going on in his face. It's really fascinating. And in addition to all of this, he's also got something called seductive peach luck. There's a bunch of different peach lucks, types of luck that can show up in the face, 5 different types. I'm not going to go into that. That can be a separate video. But seductive peach luck are people that are a little steamy looking in the eyes. Oftentimes, women will go for this look to look sultry and seductive. And it doesn't explicitly relate to sex. What it relates to, a lot of it is people are usually drawn to people. They want to talk to them. They want to divulge information to people like this. And a lot of times it's about overcoming tragedy. So I don't know what his life is like, but people with seductive peach luck usually have a thread about either guiding people to overcome tragedy or they've gone through tragedy and they've digested it well. But I would argue if he's a comedian, comedians make us laugh. They make the darkness of life a bit better. So those are my thoughts on his features and whatnot. And then looking at his public persona, his natural face, and inner persona, that's really interesting. His public persona looks like an NFL alpha linebacker, which I think is very interesting in relation to a comedian being on stage because when you're a comedian and you're throwing insults that are soft edge but funny and you're talking about very, politically divisive things, you're walking a very fine line. And with those features, it follows suit. Like he looks like a big alpha that can throw down a lot of things in terms of his comedy and get away with it. So he's very alpha looking in terms of his public persona, which I think serves him incredibly well in terms of being a comedian. Now his inner persona is much softer looking, wider featured. And when we see these big sizable differences in the public persona and the inner persona, that means who Matt Rife is publicly and who he is behind closed doors probably are pretty different. Now, all of us are trying to strive to be pretty much the same person, but the comedian does have to adopt usually a different persona sometimes to be who they are. They play characters, they kind of become a persona. So that would be my guess. Again, I would talk to him, find out what that is, but very interesting features, very interesting the elemental dominance on his face. So I was really intrigued by his face. He's almost one of the people I would want to read twice. I would want to do some digging and find out about him. But again, if you haven't checked out his comedy, you should. He's hysterical. Hope you guys like this reading. If you have questions, please let me know. And if you got comments, leave those below as well. Thanks a bunch.